Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Real Heroes Don't Wear Capes, presented by HS Heroes. Those of us on are the HS Heroes team, and we thought we would kick it off by sharing our stories with you. So, Krystle, take it away.
Hi, my name's Krystle Sutherland. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, and I guess I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my journey with HS and how I've been living with it. So I'm currently 40 years old. I have had HS since I was 14. It started in my groin and didn't really progress bad until I got into my later teens, probably 18, 19. At that point, I was living in the States and I didn't have insurance. So I would just go to walk-in clinics, have my HS lanced, packed, get antibiotics, sometimes a pain, something to tolerate the pain. And that kind of went on for me for years. I ended up moving back to Canada in 2007, where I had also had a pilonidal cyst that was had been bothering me for about a decade. And when I came back to Canada, I had a general surgeon say, this girl's in her early 20s. She can hardly sit, she can hardly drive. Like, this isn't a quality of life for someone. So they went in and removed that. It was the size of a large grapefruit. Took me about a year to come back from that surgery. And from then, once that was done, what I thought might have been, the pilonidal and the HS hand in hand, I still was getting, HS flares in other areas. So, I was going to the gyno regularly, getting, my bits checked, and nobody ever said anything. And I thought, if they aren't alarmed, I'm not alarmed. I went for STD checks on the reg because I had a needle injury where I was going to school for aesthetics, and I was doing electrolysis, and I had a needle that I was working with go on my client and then puncture through my gloves. So for 5 years, I was monitored by the Alberta Health, calling me to go every 3 months and get my blood checked just to make sure nothing developed over those years. So I knew that it kind of wasn't an STD, but I wasn't sure what it was. And it wasn't finally until I started getting the flares, like also on my breast. So it started my groin, kind of went in my armpits, buttocks. But once it was on my breast one night, I Googled breast, groin, buttocks, boils. And that was the first time I had ever seen hidradenitis suppurativa come up. So I ended up like texting or calling my mom at like 1 a.m. at night in tears saying, oh my God, this is what I have. I think this is what I have. So booked in with my GP. The first thing that they did was they sent me to a gyno, and in the time in Alberta, your GP could only send patients to a gyno like 2 days out of the month to get on a patient list. So it took me about a year to get in there. And the gyno I was going to see was out that day, and I got like a fresh, like new, right out of university woman, and she said, "This is hidradenitis suppurativa. We, there's not a lot on this, but what there is, we're going to have to hit this hard, and you're going to have to fight, and we're going to get this under control for you." So after that, I had to go back to my GP and get a referral to a derm, which took another year to get in. By then I had done, my own Google research and whatever, and I knew a little in and out of what there was for key characteristics of what this dermatologist should know. So she came out and basically had a textbook. Keep in mind, this is only, 8, 9 years ago, and said, yeah, you do have this. You have bad hygiene. You should be taking bleach baths. We want to put you on Accutane, blah, 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 blah. And basically, she just wasn't hitting the notes of what I wanted. And when she came out and said, this is the like most up-to-date technology, like photocopied out of a book, I just started crying because I'm like, who's, getting the latest technology in textbook. And at this point too, it was so bad that my parents were literally had contacted the Cleveland HS institution down there, and they had sent me like a package, and we were going to pay out of pocket for me to go there because like I had like a bullet, looked like a shotgun wound on the side of my left breast that just wasn't healing. And, you know, I couldn't wear underwear. I was losing some of my mobility and just constantly felt sick, like from, I don't know if it was the infection or the extreme inflammation, but like something had to be done. So the derm, the second derm, I had asked her for a referral to another one. That derm ended up being in the same building, and I went in there and they walked in crying and they said, you know what, we know what this is. We know how to treat you. Like, we got you. And you know, that was life changing for me. And through that, I got in contact with a Canadian patient group, advisory group. And that's how I really got to meet Mike and Steph and got involved in advocacy, because I just didn't want anyone to feel alone. And, you know, with the advocacy, I tell Steph and Mike all the time, you know, when we started out, it was just getting the word out of this disease. But now it's really blown up, especially in the past 5 years. And I feel like now our main goal is, yes, to connect with others, but to make sure people are getting the correct treatment and the help that they need to get the treatment to be able to move on with their lives, because you can still live a really productive life with this disease.
Well said.
Snaps because clapping feels too loud. That was really well said.
Thanks.
Mike, you wanna tell your story next?
No, but yes, of course. Hi everyone. My name is Mike Weens, and I live in Peterborough, Ontario, which is about an hour and a half north of Toronto. I guess my story starts about roughly 2004, 2005. I'm not very good with years. Where I noticed I started getting sores in my armpits, just a couple, one or two, nothing serious. I actually just thought at first that it was acne. I didn't think that acne could be in my armpits, but that's kind of what it looked like. They were small. They popped like a zit. I didn't think anything of it. But then they started coming a bit more often, and it got my attention, and they were a bit bigger. And one day they just quit in my armpits for about a year and a half. But other parts of me started getting really bad arthritis at that time. And I was seeing a really, really good doctor who had basically said no to any other diagnosis and said, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I am going to find out, and I mean it, and I promise. And that's the first time any doctor had ever said that to me, and it changed my life. And so I actually didn't tell him about the bumps in my arms because I was afraid that I would overwhelm him. And it's like, because he was actually believing me about my joint pain and my back pain for the first time ever. And not only believing me, but he was finding things wrong. I had dislocations, discs that were herniated. I had bone spurs that were connecting all over my spine and neck. And no doctor had ever really looked before. And the things in my armpits were so minimal at first, I didn't really think much of it. Fast forward 4 or 5 years, he still didn't know what was wrong with me, but there was a lot wrong with me. And he, as he tells his doctor, his fellow sort of doctors and people that he's teaching, the more I looked, the more I found. But one day, the sores, I at first I didn't even put them together with what was happening in my arms a while ago, but they came back. But they were in my groin this time. They were bigger. There were more of them. There were more often. They were nasty. I at my worst, I was probably getting a new one every day. and I really didn't know what was going on. I looked online and I found STD sort of stuff, and I figured it had been a long time, and it started in my armpits. That really didn't make a lot of sense. But I was embarrassed for a long time about like talking to my doctor. I was afraid that I was going to scare him off with, oh, this is just another thing wrong with Ween's. I can't handle anymore. He has this other arthritis, whatever. And I didn't give him enough credit. And yeah, and it's dumb. It's a mistake that I consider to this day one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, is because the two are very much connected, which I had no idea at the time that boils could be related to joint pain, but oh boy, can they. Anyways, I finally had to go to the doctor about this because I was getting so many sores so often, and there's one big one on my scrotum that would not go away. It kept getting bigger, and then it popped, and then there was just a hole. I had an extra hole where there definitely should not have been a hole. I had to see a doctor. I broke down in front of my father and cried. It's like, I don't know what's going on, but it hurts so bad, and I'm embarrassed, and like one of the lowest points of my life. My dad got me to our doctor, who's really good. I love the man. And I lucked out where a lot of people have had problems getting a diagnosis, like seeing a doctor, like doctors not recognizing it first. My doctor took one look at me and said, "Holy beep, I know what that is. It's HS." And it turns out that he had been at a lecture by my now dermatologist a month before with a medical student. And this is just one of the things they were talking about. And I got really lucky. So he sent me to my dermatologist to confirm, and it was HS. And I was pretty much steady. I was put on Humira, and both my arthritis and my HS got significantly better. And I was better until probably about a year ago, when some outside medical stuff with my father started to change everybody's life. And I noticed, I think stress is a real big contributor to HS. And I went from a stable stage to a very unstable, holy crap, now I understand what this is all about, stage 3. I was supposed to see a surgeon last week, but because of major snowstorm, it was canceled. I'm going in February. I think that's my HS story.
Thanks, Mike.
Isn't it like so, like when you have a doctor that totally understands? And it's funny because the derm I'm with now, my GP saw at a medical convention. So, I mean, even, if you get a doctor who finds out and then you can move up to another specialist, like it's nice to see, other people in the medical community coming forward. And also, like how you said, you didn't realize like the two diseases were connected. It's, I feel like that plays a huge part in diagnosis for folks as well, because, it all comes down to inflammation and how it's going to express. And, like another thing I find hard with HS, like you said, like it started in my groin and then all of a sudden it migrated to somewhere else. And then all of a sudden it's in the back of my scalp and on my neck. And it can also just go away for long periods of time. And then, like you said, something stressful, something triggers, boom, it's back when you least expect it. And that makes it really hard to like live with that too, because you never know when it's going to be knocking on your door.
Also, it was so nice to hear that you had a doctor who said, I don't know what this is, but I am going to find out, because so often when you do have these big health problems, I don't want to say often, I don't know if that's true, but you get written off. And like, also like, we're all overweight, and like that also plays a role in diagnosis, because sometimes doctors are like, you're overweight, that's why your body hurts, that's why your joints hurt, and you get written off. So to have one who is saying like, I believe you, I'm going to figure it out, is just like world changing.
Oh, it really is, because I went through several doctors in Ottawa that accused me of just being pill seeking. Like, you just want pain medication. And I really felt that they didn't understand my pleas for help. They were just seeing that as pleas for medication, where it's like, I was asking to be put out of pain. What was wrong? Not give me pills, let me get out of here. But I guess I don't know if I didn't express that enough or what. But yeah, no, to have a doctor actually feel like he believed me and to openly say, I don't know what's wrong with you, because I thought the doctors were supposed to know everything. But he was willing to tell me, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And it took him 6 years, but he found out. He didn't. He sent me to the right people to find out that I have a rare arthritis called Sappho syndrome. And, actually getting that diagnosis too completely changed my life.
I was going to say that's a great thing too, because sometimes you get doctors who think, I don't know what it is, but I don't want to give this patient to somebody else. I'm going to figure it out. And that's a problem too, because if you don't know, you should be trying to get that patient help. But, unfortunately, there are some doctors with like God complexes and want to solve everything themselves. And that becomes a bit of an issue as well.
I went to so many different doctors. In Peterborough's in sort of a triangle of 3 big cities of Kingston, Toronto, and Ottawa. He was sending me all over trying to figure out, it's like, okay, I read about this guy with this condition, you might have this, let's go get that tested. And he was throwing the kitchen sink at me. And well, to this day, he calls me his CLB, his complicated little bunny. And keep in mind, I'm 6'4" and over 300 pounds. Little is usually not a word described, but yeah, I am his complicated little bunny. But no, I love the man. I between him and my dermatologist, I think those doctors have literally saved my life.
But even like in the last 10 years, we all live, in different parts of the country, and all of our doctors know each other and are friends. So, I mean, even, like he said, oh, I'm going to find out, and it might've took some time. Like, it's crazy right now, like how word to mouth goes. Like, for example, like our postcards, we started out in one clinic, and then now they're, halfway in provinces across Canada, and it was just word to mouth. So even the connection that like the doctors have and the research and the foundations that are going up have come so far too. Like, I think it's going to be a lot quicker for them to find another doctor or someone who knows, like, now than it would have been back like when we were trying. Not to age us all, but
another thing I've noticed is my doctor calls me in to talk with the med students that he teaches. And I've noticed within the last year or two, it's gone from what is HS to, oh, we've talked about that. And it was the first time I had a student tell me, oh, we talked about that in class, I almost cried. It's like, okay, they're talking about it in med school. Because my dermatologist told me, he's like, we never heard about this in med school.
Well, and there's so many young, like, we're going to have some of them up in the future episodes, but there's so many young derms in Canada right now that, actually, went into dermatology for hidradenitis suppurativa. And that's, a big change too. Like,
oh yeah. Oh, it's so cool.
It is.
Not that they have it, you know what I mean.
Well, Stephanie, are you ready to?
Please, we'd like to hear you.
All right, so our stories have a lot of similarities. I first got my first HS symptoms in 2003, and they were all in my groin. And in 2003, when you're Googling lesions in the groin, you really only get STDs as an answer. It wasn't until I was 17 and developed them in my armpits that I finally sought medical intervention, because I wasn't as embarrassed to tell my doctor about wounds in my armpits as I was wounds in my groin. She really wasn't sure what it was and sent me to an acne specialist who also at the time didn't clock what it was. But it wasn't until 2011 when I developed perennial abscesses so large that they put me in the hospital that I eventually came to a diagnosis. When I first developed these abscesses, I went to the emergency room and they refused imaging and they instead lanced and packed these wounds. And I felt like I really wasn't being listened to when I was trying to tell them where my pain was and how bad my pain was. I ended up having to go twice before finally getting admitted when they realized I developed baseball-sized pockets of infection on each side of my rectum. And it was then that I was put in the care of a surgeon. Now, he also didn't really know what he was treating at this point, and the infection was getting worse and worse. So I ended up with a temporary ileostomy as the infection had kind of destroyed portions of my rectum. And, I wasn't getting any relief at this hospital. So I finally just went to the emergency room in Toronto at Mount Sinai. And it was there that I started finally getting doctors who were listening and who were trying to get me the relief I needed. They first had to cut out all of the infected tissue, and what was supposed to be a temporary ileostomy became a permanent colostomy because too much muscle had to be removed and I had no function. I wasn't able to, make those muscles work at all. I couldn't hold anything. It was gross for a bit there, guys. And this much like Mike, I was under so much stress. I started getting an HS flare kind of all over my body, on my legs and on my arms. And they brought in dermatologists to look at it. And it was then that I got my HS diagnosis. But at that point, it almost didn't matter to me, even though I'd been living with it for so long, because I was so focused on what was going on with the complications that came from it. But through this experience, I met my dermatologist and I was in her care for a decade until she moved to the Mayo Clinic to focus on HS research. And now I have a new young and passionate derm who's really great at what he does. And with surgery and a combination of treatments, I live my life relatively HS free. It's just the odd stress moments that I get little flares. But isn't it? It's so like our stories are so different, but like you find similarities in all of them.
Oh yeah, there's similar beats throughout.
And we all have like secondary conditions too. So I mean, if back, in the day when, we were trying to get a diagnosis, it was probably confusing too to say, hey, I've got all these symptoms of, Stephanie with gastric, me pilonidal disease, or I have arthritis issues too. You with the SAVO, and say, like, why, are they having all these symptoms? Because maybe they didn't realize that they were like overlapping diseases, and like the whole comorbidity thing, and realizing HS is so much more than just skin deep. And a lot of us have secondary conditions, and that's why we always say what works for one doesn't work for all. And Mike's doctors patent the phrase, like, I've never seen every HS case. What did she say, Mike? You say it better. Like, they're all different, or
the only thing the same about HS patients is that no two are the same.
Thank you. And we've all come to find that, like, I've never heard the exact same story, similar, but not. And like, going back to the weight too, like, even when I was like at my thinnest, when I was younger, in my teens, and like I would go in and get them lanced. Like, I had a lady say to me one time, well, do you eat French fries? And I was like, well, of course, who doesn't? And she's like, well, maybe that's your problem. Maybe you should get baked potatoes and not French fries. And so I quit eating French fries for like years, because I'm like, oh, and like they would just say, like, you're prone to cysts and boils, like. And then I went to school for aesthetics like a dummy, and had to do like waxing and massages, and it just like after that, in 2008, my skin just went like, rah, what are you doing to me? So,
Yeah, when your skin growls at you, you've done something a little wrong.
oh, and like, everybody who says, like, goes back to the embarrassment. Like, when I was a teenager, I didn't even want to tell my mom when I had my period. So like, I'm going to say, hey, look at these big lumps in my, groin area. Like, no. So yeah, like, it is embarrassing because then you think like, well, what did I do to like cause this? Or, and like, it's just, it just is such a relief to like know that like there's so many of us out there that deal with this and that we don't have to be embarrassed about it. And like, we didn't cause this and we can't
Mhm.
give it to other people. So, I mean, it's just something we learn to live with.
I
I was
sometimes
so
wish that.
relieved when I
Go
sorry,
ahead, Mike.
I was so relieved when I got to the stage of realizing this isn't contagious. Because with the pus for a while, I was really concerned.
I feel like
Sorry.
I wish that
Yeah.
it had manifested for the first time in my armpits, because I feel like I would have sought medical attention far, far sooner. It was because it was in my groin that I was like, I am not telling anybody. I am 13 years old. I probably have an STD. Like this is like, I'm locking down. No one is finding out about this ever. And it wasn't until it moved to my armpits and I was like, okay, well, maybe it's not what I think it is.
And like, I thought it was like razor rash for years too, right? Until like Mike said earlier, it just started coming back more often. And like, all of a sudden, they used to open up on their own. They're not opening up anymore. The skin's got like this purpley, like scale to it. And then when it does flare, I noticed like I would press, this is so gross, but like everyone that has HS knows this, you press one area and you got it shooting out the others. And then, and then I think, oh, well, did I make my sinus tracts worse by pressing and doing that? Like, so I know like I have some personal guilt too and some like regrets, like, man, I wish I would have gone back and like said something sooner. But at the same time, for like a lot of us, they didn't really know what it was then. So like, I think that's why we're so dedicated to sharing, because we don't want, adolescents out there thinking they're gross and having to be embarrassed and not wanting to come out of the house or live their lives because there's something that's wrong with their skin that they could get treatment for.
One thing, yeah, my HS started in my early 30s, and I couldn't imagine the social, like mental issues that would have done to me if I was 13, 14, as opposed to 34, 35. Yeah, very much so. People need to know about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I feel like the sooner you get treatment, then you're not going to get the tracks. You're not going to go down the paths because they can deal with it. And you probably won't have to eventually end up on such, like, I know so many people that were like in their adolescence that I've sent in and said, I think that's HS. And, they've never got past a stage 1 because they've gotten care and they have a treatment care team. And like, that's, the longer you wait, the worse it is, I think.
For sure.
And even if it takes you like a year or whatever to get in to see a specialist, like, yes, that's a long time. And yes, that's terrible, but at least, like here in Canada, like you are going to eventually get the treatment and like somebody is going to like help you out. And, it is worth the wait, because once you get in there and you have access to care and medication, it's a game changer for a lot of folks.
Oh, it changed my life completely. Agreed.
I think, another thing, like I first met Michael about 5 or 6 years ago at one of the first ever Canadian awareness walks in Edmonton.
The
And
first.
the first, yes. And,
The first.
that was a life-changing day for me, because that was the first time I had ever seen other patients with HS like all together and realize I'm not alone. There's a big community out there and I don't have to be alone. I can talk to people about milking my wounds or whatever the heck is going on that other people aren't going to know about, right? Like, and it might sound, gross or whatever to other people, but for us HS folks, like this is a day of our lives. This is stuff we deal with, and the smell, the whatever, like it's just stuff that we can talk to each other about and not have to be ashamed.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that sometimes has daily milkings.
Yeah.
We need to
I
find
hear
a
ya.
better way to say that. It sounds so atrocious.
I don't, but I
Daily
literally
milkings.
said that to my father. It's like, I gotta go milk a boil.
It
I'll be
makes me
back.
think of Meet the Parents, where he's talking about milking the cat. Milking an armpit.
Tell us about milking the cat. I would, yeah. Oh no.
Man, I do. My doctors have been so kind of wonderful throughout this. And my family doctor didn't know what it was, but once I got diagnosed, she then took it upon herself to learn all she could about it and has since been able to diagnose others and send them to get the help they need. So like, really, it just depends on the doctor so much and how much effort they're willing to put into your care when it's something more difficult than just, a cold.
Yeah, my doctor even gives out like my HS Heroes business card to young patients, and they're like, if you want to talk to someone in the area, like call Krystle. And I thought that was like something that was really cool too, because it's just nice to have hear it from someone else sometimes.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot to take in, to hear, hey, you have this disease and it's never gonna go away, but like. So
As you
it is
talking about
nice to have a community.
Oh yeah, just knowing, as you said before, just knowing you are not going through this fight alone. Other people may not have your exact experiences, but they kind of understand what you're going through.
It really put my own HS in perspective for me when I met other people, because I went through kind of that bad, scary moment where I ended up, with a colostomy. But it wasn't until I met other people and my HS was in stage 1 that I realized, you really aren't doing too badly. Because I would see Dr. Alavi and be like, my HS is so bad. It's the worst it's ever been. No one has HS worse than me. And then I met other people with HS. And I was like,
Yeah,
you need to have a reality check, girl, because you are not doing too badly. You should be thankful for the stage that you're in and the help that you're getting.
I found that at the walk too, like meeting other people and like hearing their stories, it like really put mine into perspective. And I was like, hey, like you're never gonna like feel sorry for yourself again, or think woe is me, because girl, it could have been way worse. And that's another reason why I wanted to get involved in helping other people, because I once I got my stuff in check, I was like, cool, like now I want to give back.
Mhm. Exactly. That's exactly it. Meeting those other people made me want to help more people because their stories helped me so deeply on such a personal level. I thought like only good can come from trying to connect patients with each other.
You're here.
And
Yeah.
even like, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say it's about the community, as you say. Let's see, especially it takes a village, but it might take a village to get through a disease like HS too.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said.
Thanks.
Another thing that like really keeps me like interested in going to is seeing like patients that we've you know um told to go see this derm or that derm, or about the treatments, and 2 years 3 years down the line, these people went stage 3 back to stage 1 and have their lives back. And like, to me, to see someone at like the worst of the worst and thinking like this isn't going to get better, and we all know because we've been there, to see other people like come from the other side of that is amazing to me. And it's like, okay, well, we can like we can do this and you're not alone. And I think that gives people inspiration to fight the fight too, because like we can all say, oh, we're on medication and this, that, the other. But I mean, let's be honest, there's been a lot of work that's gone into, where we are all now too, like between dieting, food restrictions, different medications. We've all been through surgeries, like it, you got to put in the work to get the results. And like, I don't want to sound like I'm pushing like an infomercial for a workout gear or whatever, but like, I think the best advice I got was from that one gynecologist that said, like, you're going to hit this hard and you're going to have to fight for this. And that was the mindset that I went in with, was, okay, I'm going to be putting in the work as well. So, because I mean, when I first started, Humira wasn't even indicated for HS patients yet. So I did like 2 or 3 years of back-to-back deroofings before I could even qualify for that. And I think, having all those sinus tracts and the biofilm and all that gunk removed was what really helped me get my mobility back and helped me to be able to maintain the level of life I'm at now with just being on a biologic. And and it's amazing what the human body can do, because I'll tell you what, I had a piece of my vagine literally cut out and I was horrified because there was a huge flare and the thing grew back. So, I mean, the human body, and I've heard this from many women that's had the same thing, the human body is incredible. So I know a lot of people are like afraid of surgical intervention, but I mean, a lot of the de-roofings now, you're just given a local, so you're not put down, and it's really a pretty simple procedure, and it's worth it because I mean, there's a low chance that they're coming back, and I knock on wood, but I mean, I can't even tell you how many I've had. I've not had one come back.
I also had an armpit surgery, but they did put me under. It was both armpits at the same time. But since I've had it, I occasionally get a flare there, but really for the most part, my HS is non-existent. And it does take time to heal. You have to be prepared for the like length of time that it is going to take to heal these sites. But once they are healed, you should be pretty good in those areas. Like you shouldn't see it. You definitely won't see it as much as you were seeing it before.
How long would you say it took you to heal after you had both armpits done?
Both. I mean, I think it can take like 3 to 6 months. They did it so long ago, but because they leave these sites open and they're removing so much tissue in them, they have to heal up and then in. So it does take time to have these things heal, but once they're healed, you're kind of good to go.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're good to go as long as they get all the biofilm and everything out of there.
I'm going to hold you to that when I get my thigh cut off.
Well, that might take a little longer than an armpit incision. So,
but you know what? But you're bending the armpit. The thigh at least is straight. Like I know, like my worst surgeries have been like in the folds or in the private areas. Like, when I've had ones done on my butt and stuff before, it's like every time I go to the bathroom, cool, I gotta like change my dressings and then redo everything. And it doesn't matter what adhesive tape it is, I'm allergic to 99% of them. And so then I'm ripping off all the skin. So I usually end up with more of like a scabby whatever from the adhesive than I have from like where I've had my surgery as well. Like,
and he started in the thigh, but he's now in the groin too. Mr. Happy's not so happy anymore.
Yeah.
That sounded awful. I'm sorry.
I think a lot of people name and call them, like give them like a personhood to their abscesses.
My big boil now is Steve. He's a bit of a jerk. He'd be very temperamental.
What a jerky name, I'm sure.
Sorry to all the nice Steves.
Sounds like a jerk.
Oh, I didn't say that.
So I have a question for you guys too. Like, I feel like another thing that I struggle with this disease is like flares will come up so quick and sometimes they can like just disappear just as fast. So like there's been times where I'm like, all right, I'm not going to call my doctor because this thing's probably going to open up and go away on its own. And like those are always the ones that I end up needing to go in for. But like there's been times when I have called and like I'll get up the next day and it's completely gone. And I'm like, okay, is there something mentally wrong with me? Or like, am I the only one this happens to? Or do you guys find you have these things pop up and disappear at some points too?
They do. Yeah. And I feel like we've touched on this in the past, but like you just can't know until you know.
Yeah.
So like until it's at a point where it's so bad that you can't handle it, it sometimes doesn't feel worth it to even call your derm because by the time you get in there, it might be gone.
Yeah. And then you feel like you're wasting their time, right? Like somebody else could have been in there. But like
I was whining and complaining to Krystle a couple of months ago because I had one in my groin and it hurt so bad. And I called my derm office and they're like, we'll get you in tomorrow. In the night, it popped. And then the next day I felt fine. And so I went in there and I was like, look at the spot that's not bugging me anymore. Please inject it and I'll get out of your hair. But like the day before, I couldn't even sleep. I couldn't close my legs. It was like a red hot poker. And then the next day, once it drained, I was like, well, now it feels like nothing.
And that's what makes it like, I always say it's such a complex little word, because it's like times like that where you're like, is this disease messing with my head? Like,
and also you don't want to feel like you're wasting your derm's time either, because like for a lot of us, it takes so long to get in to see these people, and you want to like maintain that good like patient doctor relationship, and you don't want to go in when it's a little like thing or it turns out to be nothing. So that, I think that's part of the waiting game as well, is when you go and you want to make sure you're going in for a reason, not something that's going to be able to heal on its own the next day.
The first time I went in for Steve, I know I apologize. Like, if this is a waste of time, I'm sorry, but this is bigger than I've had in years. And, you know, my pants came off and very quickly it's like, oh, honey, you are not wasting our time.
Oh, honey.
you know,
But,
I remember there were like times when I knew there would be one, and I knew my derm would like when he didn't have as many patients or whatever back in the day, like he used to love doing the surgeries. So I remember I'd like go in and my mom would drive me or whatever, and I'd be like, don't say anything. Like, I cannot get a deroofing today. I will come back next week. Like, because I wouldn't be ready, because I had gone in there so many times and they'd be like, oh, well, guess what? We're just going to take it out right now. And I know like I shouldn't be complaining about that, because it's not like an option anymore, because because of the awareness, the derms are very busy, and they've gone from, a few patients to hundreds over the last few years. But, like that, I just remember going in there at times thinking, okay, like I need a week or two to get my life together before I can be down for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. My clinic, the surgeon who works in my clinic, his name is Dr. George, and this man is just like sunshine in a bottle. And I went in there once for a very minor armpit lesion that was healing. I just needed a little bit of help. And I saw Dr. George and he was like, I'm going to get my hands on those armpits. And it was just such a strange, but kind of fun way for a surgeon to tell me I might need surgery. And he just like, his bedside manner, just of all doctors, is just so nice and comfortable and genuine. Mike, I know your surgery is with him later this year, and I just think he's going to take such good care of you.
Yeah.
my heart just lifted as you were telling that story. My most important thing for the doctor, even more than knowledge, is a sense of humor and like a bedside. Like,
he's so funny. Like, he is hilarious. I spoke with him and Dr. Lavi at the Canadian Dermatology Association conference a few years ago, and like he had me like crying in tears. Like, he was hilarious and just so nice.
I think I'm hoping I'm gonna get along with him. He sounds amazing.
You will for sure, Mike.
Yeah.
He's
so
kind of got
good at
the
what he
same
does.
kind of humor as us, a little bit like dry and sarcastic, and like we really all get off on like that. And like, seriously, you're gonna love him. He's hilarious.
I mean, I've seen bad science fiction that starts with a laser to the groin, but I'm hoping he won't be bad science fiction.
No, he won't be.
No, and the slide deck that he presented that day, he said, like every one of the patients that he showed on that slide deck, he said, you want to know how I know these surgeries work? He's like, because a month later, every single one of these patients have come back. If he was doing like the axilla underarm, he said they'd come back and say, we want the other side done, or we want the other side of our groin done. So, I mean, he's doing good work for that.
I do have two sites he can play with, one much more than the other, but yeah, I might be a repeat customer. We'll see. I don't, do I leave a Yelp review if I'm impressed, or
word of mouth?
Okay, good cutter would let him laser me again.
Well, and the nice thing is that you can come back on here afterwards and tell everyone how your experience went with that.
Yeah, I will totally do maybe an expose of being cut by a world-renowned professional.
Yes, and from word on the street is he likes scotch. He's a scotch drinker. He's got quite a nice cabinet, I've heard. So I don't know if you're into that, but
Duly noted. I prefer something a little greener, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, scotch could be good too, and I will have to remember that. Maybe present it after surgery. Don't want to give the wrong idea.
yeah.
But yeah, okay, good to know. Thank you for the tip.
You know,
I'm Mike Weens. That was Stephanie and Krystle somewhere in there. And we are part of HS Heroes. Thanks very much for joining us. And come hang out with us again next month. Hopefully we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
bye. Thanks for joining us.